Hello there, my friends and neighbors. This is Jesse Bryant on the 8th of September. I've been doing some reading lately. I had finished Herbert Spencer's book that my campaign manager gave to me. Excellent work, excellent book. I recommend it. In fact, I might have to do more videos on it because Herbert Spencer's sharp as a whip, and he definitely knew what he was talking about, and everything that he writes about in his book is still applicable today in large part. But for now, I just got Governor Gary Johnson's book in the mail, so I'm going to be working on reading this. It's called The 7 Principles of Good Government. Liberty, People, and Politics. Yeah. So I guess I'll just read off the 7 principles here to start with. And Governor Johnson says, "My 7 principles have worked and continue to work in every aspect of my life. To stay focused and true to these principles, I keep them written down on a small piece of paper in my wallet. They are, number 1, become reality-driven. Don't kid yourself or others. Find out what's what and base your decisions and actions on that. Number 2, always be honest and tell the truth. It is extremely difficult to do any real damage to people who are willing to tell the truth regardless of the consequences. Number 3, always do what's right and fair. Remember, the more you accomplish, the louder your critics become. Learn to ignore them. Maintain your integrity and continue to do what's right. Number 4, determine your goal. Develop a plan to reach that goal. Then act. Don't procrastinate. Number 5, make sure everyone who ought to know what you're doing knows what you're doing. Number 6, don't hesitate to deliver bad news. Acknowledge mistakes made immediately. There may still be time to salvage things or make corrections. Number 7, be willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. If your job doesn't excite you enough to follow this principle, resign and find a job you love enough to do what it takes." The 7 principles outlined in this book explain how I conduct my life, my business, and my campaign to restore liberty and prosperity to America. They explain how I will approach the vital task of bringing government and its spending under control and reinstating individual freedom and opportunity as the foundations of this great nation. And I should mention that I've actually met Governor Johnson. I actually got to shake his hand and talk to him for a few minutes. Very polite, very gentlemanly guy. I met him at the Libertarian Convention in Kansas City back in March of 2012, yeah. March of this year. So I feel comfortable with him. You know, he's the one candidate for president that I've actually gotten to speak with personally. So I appreciate that, and very down-to-earth, very approachable person. He's almost too cool to be president, actually. He's almost too likable to be a modern American president. Our presidents these days are too stiff and too inaccessible, too far off. You know, they're basically just there to be media icons, to be, you know, a puppet on stage. So, sad as it is, you know, we really just don't elect men of his caliber anymore. I'm afraid that in the past 50 years or so, America has really elected probably the worst to be found. Probably the worst that our country has to offer has made it to the highest office in the land. Whereas during the first 100 years of our history or so, I'd say that generally the American public would elect the best man that they could find in all of the country. Oh yeah, I can tell already this is going to be a worthwhile read. Although I have been reading a lot of libertarian and minarchist ethics and philosophy lately. So I'm sure that we probably will find some familiar ideals in here. Speaking of which, right here, Governor Johnson says on page 9, "It is not the proper role of government to manage our daily lives, decide what is best for our families, impose values on our communities and institutions, or determine winners and losers in the marketplace. While it is the duty of government to protect us from other external threats and sometimes one another, it is not the role of government to protect us from ourselves. And it is certainly not the proper role of government to intervene in the affairs of other sovereign nations simply because we don't approve of them or somehow believe we should shape them in our own image. Yeah, well, I got no disagreements there, Governor. And it seems like Governor Johnson has pretty much been made to be president his whole life. I was reading in here about his family, and it says that his father was in the 101st Airborne during World War II, lost his lung due to a bayonet in the back, and man, he's had a rough life, and he always said to his son, when you're president or when you're a billionaire, you'll do this or that or the other. So, and then when he was in high school, apparently he was voted most likely to be president someday. What do you know? So, Gary Johnson is just a high-performing, highly motivated, highly driven individual. He's definitely founding father material. And, at least he comes out and admits here in his book, he used to smoke marijuana, right? It's interesting to me that people still have to admit that, right? It'd be like if someone wrote a book about themselves for their political campaign and said, oh, and I used to drink alcohol, by the way. Or I used to smoke cigarettes, I mean, who cares, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But apparently, American society still hasn't evolved. We haven't matured enough as a society to realize this, I guess. But it is amazing to me to see that, such a high performer, a high achiever, is somebody who used to smoke marijuana. I remember when Adam Kokesh interviewed George Hutchins, a gentleman from North Carolina running for Congress, I believe. And this George Hutchins guy was saying, everybody that I know of who has admitted to smoking marijuana has turned out to be a very irresponsible person. And I'm just thinking to myself, really? Because most of the people that I've heard of that admit to smoking marijuana, that publicly admit to it, they're all very successful individuals, highly responsible businessmen, athletes, or politicians. Not to mention that, the past 3 presidents of our nation have all smoked marijuana, at least the past 3. And there's a lot of speculation that the first president and probably the first couple presidents that we had also smoked marijuana. And back in the day, didn't seem to ruffle any feathers. But I'm going to enjoy reading this book. Governor Johnson is pretty scholarly, pretty well-spoken gentleman, and his book is fairly well written so far as I've gotten into it. And I recommend buying it. I had said to my campaign manager, we really should get as many people to buy this as possible and make it, the New York Times bestseller. Then Governor Johnson can be on the news to talk about his book and let them know, by the way, I'm also running for president, since the Republicans and Democrats seem intent on ensuring that no third party gets any attention or any media coverage. Especially not this year when basically our best option is somebody totally unrelated to them. This is a good year for the Libertarian Party, I think. It's going to be a good election cycle for third parties, especially Governor Johnson, and I look forward to reading his work and doing some promoting for him at the state fair. So, you take care, neighbors, and I wish you the best.